Let's welcome the man that's been spoken about a lot. He led the East Perth Football Club to a premiership in 1972. He's flown all over from Melbourne to be here today. He's spending, he told me, about a month here in Perth. Still classes himself as a die-in-the-wool West Australian. He's one of ours. He's black and blue. It's Mel Brown, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks very much. What am I supposed to do?
So you want me to ask you a few questions? I thought you might want to take centre stage here.
Oh, no. I'll tell you, the one thing that I was sitting there laughing with Dennis Lilly and Sheaves and Tony and Bronte was the great spirit amongst those guys and their great personality. I think young kids today, they all say the same thing before a television interview, same thing after a game, and they were as boring as a night out with the nun. And I think now we've got at least a bit of character and a bit of the old-fashioned footy, but it was just terrific to hear Noddy being so humble. I've never heard that before. I remember the first time I coached him, and it seems very funny being here at the home of the garlic munchers down here. I remember at Scotch College getting called up before the headmaster, because just down there where the grounds, the schoolboy met you, not the schoolboy, the coach's box was, Sid Jackson had hit Ray Marinko, and it cost him the Sandover medal. And they were calling him the Bourne at the time. So as a Scotch College boy all dressed to thing, we started the fight, and unfortunately I was involved in it, and they put it on Channel 7. And it was played back on the news about this college boy having a bit of a blue, what it was. And I think that's what most probably changed my allegiance a little bit as a kid. As a South Fremantle, John Jerovich idol, that was my idol, and Squarey Kilmurray was a number 2 idol. They were my 2 child boys' heroes. But I can still remember when Sid down here and the headmaster came in and said what happened, and when he said that, he said, "Oh son, I'm quite proud of you." So it's all his fault that I got reported a few times, I think, over the years. But he wasn't unhappy. They tried to make a big thing about it about Scotch College, and that ended up just blowing away.
We know the success you had as a coach, but this was basically your first initiation of taking in charge of a group of men, young men, who had different characteristics, had different interests. The common thread was East Perth and playing footy. You would have been coached under the likes of Jack Sheedy and Kevin Murray and all these sort of blokes. But what did you take from them that you instilled in this group that was maybe a bit unconventional?
Well, look, I don't think I did anything. I was pretty lucky. I told you yesterday, I think, the other day, I had Austin Robertson coach me at Scotch College, and he used to say there's 4 things you do. 1, you play in front. 2, you play from the side. 3, if you're getting beaten, you belt them. And if the side gets a run on, you go and start another fight so that they stop the play and slow the play down. That's how we. And he used to say, you be with them at 3/4 time and I'll win you the game. And then we went down to, I used to sneak out of Scotch College on a Sunday and go down and have Clive Lewington coach me at Coburn. And then you get up with Cheedy and Chatty and Kevin Murray. And you're pretty lucky to have the quality of people like that around you. But when the boys talk about success, it's always, I hate coaches that say I, it's always we. And I remember when I was appointed coach, we had no politics, and that wasn't in footy like things are in everything today. We had old Frederick David Book, a Jewish gentleman, who was so excited that he gave you the best, when you won the best player on the ground on his home game, he'd give you a pair of slippers, those ones with the wool in it, with the zip up the front. That was your trophy. You won the fairest and best, and you've got a 3-ply with a plastic football stuck on it, and the bottom part, they don't even saw it properly. The little bloody things all zigged up and down because it, so we had Jack Gabberty, who was the head of the RMO Bank. And Jack was a mad Catholic, and every time we went away on a footy trip to Bunbury or somewhere, he'd Phil Mulcahy, who's here today, they'd look up and he'd find out who were the Catholics, and shit, you never stayed with those poor pricks, because he woke them up at 6 o'clock to go to Mass on the Sunday. And then we ended up years later, we had Jack Marks, who's a bloody communist. So none of us, nobody in footy, it was like people say to you, about the Aboriginal boys. How do you get on with the Aboriginal boys? Well, growing up in Darwin, you never knew they were black. They were just people. And you all went and rode horses. You all went and pulled up the yams around the dam. You all went and did a bit of fishing. You all went and had a kick. And I don't give a stuff if you're Chinese, but I do get a bit upset. I don't think I could handle these transgenders. I just arranged for my grandson. I'm starting to learn how to grow mandarins about this size. And when he's 18, he's got 13 years to go. I'm hoping I'm going to give them to him so he can take them in his pocket when he goes to a nightclub. If he throws them at the crutch and they shut across their legs, you know it's a bloke. So I think it'll be a big success amongst the blokes. I really do. I think it might be quite successful. So I think I find it a bit hard. I still think boys have a willy and girls have a pussy. But footy's been marvellous to me. I've been the luckiest bloke in the world. So I've enjoyed everywhere I've been. Here I was a playing coach, and you talk about that. You know, we had Jack Clayton. You'd never get a better person in football. If ever I could compare him to anyone, it would be like Clive Lewington. And I say Clive Lewington because God was getting even with me. I had to coach Mark Jackson. And Mark Jackson did a handstand on the Subiaco Oval one day, and Clive had won 3 premierships as a coach, and Neville Taylor ran around the ball, bounced the ball and ran it up the ground, and Clive looks at me, he spoke very, excuse me, Mel, what would you think we should do now? I said, cop Clive. And he didn't swear. I said, I'm fucked if I know. You coach 3 premierships, you tell me. I've got no idea with Jacko. So you learned that you had blokes like Jack, you had Chatty, there was coach, and the support. People never work out the support Chatty gave, for example. John Lord we had came from, I think he came over for a while. And I just remembered today looking at the book Richard McKelvey gave me that Jerry Smith will coach the Force and Carl Bierman coached the Colts, and Bradley Smith coached the Seconds because Alice McMillan, who was invited, couldn't come today. He was a terrific junior coach. He coached the Seconds, and they were successful and won the flag the same year. So, and then we had the trainer. Noddy had his own trainer. It's a bit different in Noddy's day. We only had guys trainers. Down at South, I got the first girl trainer, Philippa Stewart. And every Aboriginal had a groin injury. We didn't have one knee or ankle for the whole year. And that didn't work too good. But, so we had terrific doctors, we had terrific physios, and we had Wayne Bradshaw that used to try and stick cortisone into everybody. Used to get shitty with me because I wouldn't let the Colts have it. I can recall that. But the people around, and blokes that have been named, like McGregor, you arrive here as a little puff from Scotch College. You go out on the training track the Thursday night before the first game, and Apple gets me and he absolutely bloody flattened me in front of the stand, and I wasn't too happy with it because there's a lot of people there on the first game. So about 5 minutes later, he came around, I got him, and I got hold of him and I slung him, and the jumper tore and come off his back, and he slid into the fence. I've been with him in January with Flea and all that. We're up at Lansford training, and you know how gruff and rude he was. He was running up the sand and he kicked the seaweed, and it was a rock. You should have seen his foot. It was so I was that fucking scared of him. He said to me, after I pushed him into the fence here, he walked over and said, "You're coming to tea Thursday night?" And I had night school. I said, "Yes, Mr. Apple." We went to 10 Webb Street, Apple crossed for lunch, for dinner. So we had marvellous people. We were very lucky. And Buller McGregor, the first night out to Chichester Way at Balga, he said, "Oh, you drive me home." And I didn't know he couldn't drive. Phil might remember this. So out we go. I go out to Balga, and as I knock on he knocks on the door, he opens the door and he says, "Rhonda, what shit have we got for tea tonight?" And Rhonda said, "Bullshit, and it's going cold." So I had a pretty good start to East Perth. They were pretty great luck and great people. Except for 2 people tried to marry their daughters off me, and if Jesus is in her, there'd be another commandment, so I surrendered.
All right, Brownie. Well, another footy's about to start in a moment, but just quickly, it's 50 years, 1972. You've had an amazing career. Great to see Kevin Sheedy, your former Richmond teammate here, Sheets, who's quite frequently coming back to Perth. But if you had to package up what 1972 meant to you, and the players and the people that surrounded you, how would you surmise it in brief?
Oh, I think a relief would be the great thing. I think it was just, we were like Collingwood. We'd always get there and then we'd get a major injury or someone would get hurt or something had happened, and there was always a reason, but you keep fighting on. But one of the people, some of you will say, well, why did we ask Dennis here? Because Dennis and his brother followed East Perth and used to come here, and he found it hard coming to watch the Garlic Munchers, or watching us here at the Garlic Munchers ground now. But the good old West, which were a great club too, West Perth, by the way. They were fantastic. But when you look at the game itself, we had a lot of young and exciting new players. We had like Gary Malarkey started off half forward. We had Richard McAlgic, who became the club's best centre half back. We had Ken McCall, who's become a good half-back flanker. We had Gary Malarkey, Gary Martin could play half-back and forward. We had Cowgate, Bygrave, you didn't know where he was going. You had Phil Tini, who was the most disciplined player, most probably in my time at East Perth. He'd come down when he was a copper and he'd be kicking for goals and having to go and fetch the ball through the goals and bring them back and be practising kicking for goals. He was a beautiful kick. I mean, you had Ron Alexander that we found out needed contact lenses, and which we didn't know till he was in about third grade, third was it, or the second or something, but pretty early there. We had Bradley Smith, who was reliable, and one of the things that I remember about East Perth was Bradley Smith's wife got murdered at Bunbury, and he picked me up on his way to the game, drove down Barrack Street, and on the side of the road in those square signs that the press put out, they had football star sisters murder. And I got to the game and didn't know. He had never spoken to me about it, never told me a word, and I was the coach. So we got here, and I thought, shit. Heck said to me, his sister's just been murdered. I thought, well, the best thing to do is to start him in the middle of the ground, get him out of full backs and chasing someone. So we put him into the first ruck, and he played, I think he got in the best 2 or 3 players on the ground. And you look at blokes that weren't champion players, but were champion clubmen, like Ken Deers, who's left us, Eddie Pitter, who used to work so hard, driving trucks and delivering bricks. And every Thursday night I'd get a phone call from someone out at Gosnell's Way and say, Mr. Brown, did you know that Eddie Pitter was having a beer or 2 beers down at the Gosnell's Hotel? I'd say, oh shit, he's not, is he? How terrible. I told him to go and do it because he worked that hard 7 days a week loading bricks. I used to say to him, it's not the night before the game you've got to get a good sleep. The night before, get a good sleep on Thursday night. So I'll let him have a couple of beers and go to sleep, and then he'd be up picking up bricks for the rest of the day, loading on the trucks. So footy was all consuming. It was exciting. It gave you an opportunity. All East Perth wanted to do, as I said, was turn up to training, try your hardest, be a good team man, and then old Jack Cavity would give you a housing loan if you could afford to pay it. And the worst part was that the thing that Scotch College and Aquinas, we hated the Catholics. We wanted to beat shit out of them, and they wanted to do it to us. So we ended up with Bruce Sinclair, Phil Mulcahy, Laurie Elliott was the runner, the phys ed trainer that was there. And just as I said that, I forgot one thing. I mean, as a bloke, I talked about Macca, but what about Laurie Kennedy, the service at Mel Apple, the service he's given the club, and his lovely wife used to take us out for dinner and look after us out there, out in where he lived. And I mean, they were just fantastic. East Perth set a base. I took all the junior coaching facilities from here to South Fremantle, to Claremont, to Perth. And they've all had success. If you look over the last 20 years, at Claremont they didn't do anything. They couldn't even get Ross Glendinning that lived in their zone at Floreat Park. And then they ended up getting the Crackers and Ross Ditchburn and Harpers and Daniels and all that from working their zone, because East Perth had the best junior council. And the great tragedy of footy today is the CEO, Gil McLaughlin's the fucking worst CEO in the history of the game. He is destroying football at club level. He's destroying football at junior level. We had sides here under 18s, 16s, 14s and 12s, about 10 clubs, 9 clubs. Now you have about 1 under 18. The kids are dropping out of Sorrento, where I live, and go and watch the footy. They don't have a under 19s or under 17 side anymore. The only state in Australia where it's going ahead for boys is in Queensland. And that's the sad part. I think we're going to suffer in the next few years where there's just not enough to take it up again. And the only reason Dylan's going over to America is to try and do a deal with Paramount and Channel 10 so he get another bloody bonus before he retires at the end of the year.
Ladies and gentlemen, could go on forever. Give a big round of applause to captain coach of 1972, Mel Brown.